Black Magic Woman podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on. We also acknowledge traditional owners of the land where you, the listener or viewer, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to our elders past and present and acknowledge that this always was Aboriginal land and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Mundanara Bayles.
On this week's episode of the Black Magic Woman podcast, we pick up from last week's episode where Mundanara and Commissioner Sue-Ann Hunter are discussing the challenges of holding the government accountable for its policies and frameworks and the lack of assessment on various initiatives aimed at improving the lives of First Nations peoples.
So in the state of Victoria, is it 5 years, this Truth Commission? Where are we at with this commission in Victoria?
So it was originally 3.
3 years.
It's just one of the biggest, by the way, it's one of the biggest mandates ever for any Truth Commission.
What do you mean by one of the biggest mandates?
So this is what we have to investigate: systemic justice against First Peoples from 1788 to current. We had 3 years to do that. We got an extra year and we've got probably about 10 months left.
Okay. So this next 10 months, what's on the cards?
So we've done a heap of hearings. We just finished land injustice and we just finished health, housing, education and socioeconomic sort of life. We've still got accountability hearings when we call them back, particularly child protection and criminal justice, because they did that ages ago. So we want to know. They promised us a few things. Let's see if they
come back.
We're asking them back. Yeah, I know. We've also got 1 day of descendants hearings. So there's 3 descendants of colonisers that really want to come forward and tell.
So these are your white Australian families that have been here since the first fleet?
Well, we had Susanna Henty. So if you look down on Gunditjmara country, down in Portland, it's named the birthplace of Victoria, and that's all Henty sort of country down there. So we had Susanna Henty come on. It's a
I think I saw this one.
Yeah. So she come and spoke about her
late
descendants.
50s, early 60s, older lady?
No, a young lady. She spoke about the descendants of her people, of the Hentys. We've got a few others that we're working with at the moment that want to come forward and tell what wrongs their descendants did.
Mm. So in this commission, right, you've got Aboriginal people that are sharing.
So we've got the evidence, and it is evidence, right? And look, you know what the British are good at? Recording stuff.
Yeah.
So you can actually match stuff up, right?
Yeah.
You've got all this stuff that they've done, and it's all there, and then you've got First Peoples coming forward to tell theirs, and it matches, right? But then we're holding the state to account. So this is the first time that governments had to answer to First Peoples. So we've had the Premier of the state on the stand, the Minister for Child Protection, the Minister for Corrections, Jacqueline Symes, the Attorney, the Treasurer. Like, we've had them all come to the stand. I do encourage people to get on your Rook's website because it's all there. But this is the first time they've had to answer to us and tell us. They all come with apologies, right? And the best saying we've got there is apologies are great, but we need to see action. And so they've all come. I will say the Commissioner for Police, Shane Patton, gave an apology. He followed it up with a statement of 72 things that they're going to do within the police force in Victoria. But they also held a day and apologised to the stolen gens quite quickly too. And that was amazing. Like, you could hear a pin drop in that room. So we went to that. I think we're just asking people to listen. You know, we're not on the public record because history is told by the coloniser. So how do we, and if we don't want to take things away, because then that takes away from history, right? Because this is the way the coloniser, how do we add First People's voices to that? And how do we get a shared understanding of the state? And then how do we move forward? Because it's not working.
Yeah.
It's ugly. It's scary. The rates, being a mum, it's scary. The rates of child protection, deaths in custody, you name it, we've got the highest rates. Mm-hmm. So how does this commission and First People's Assembly push that forward to get change that we've been waiting for? And saying this, I feel like I bang my head against the brick wall every day because I've been saying the same thing since my days of working in child protection.
I was going to say my mum was removed. Her mum was removed. Her mother. So we've got 5 generations on my mother's side that were stolen children, institutionalised, made ward of the state, sent out to work. So people don't realise that trauma's in the memory of our DNA.
Exactly.
And I heard that it takes 7 generations to heal from trauma. And I'm the first generation with my 8 sisters that had the privilege to grow up with my Aboriginal mother, my Aboriginal father. First generation. And I think that's what needs to be understood, that we're talking about what happened within people's living memory.
Oh, totally.
And we're talking about recent history.
Yeah, it's not that. I talk to people and I say my nan was the last woman born on Corranderk mission. So it's not like the missions aren't that, like it's not, you know, I grew up with my nan. I know my nan, you know. I knew exactly who she was. These stories, well, I don't even like calling them stories because it takes away from the truth, the truth of people's lives.
That were controlled, every aspect controlled by the state.
And surveilled, like the constant surveillance and still happens, right? It just looks different. Mm-hmm. It looks completely different. These systems are deeply rooted in colonisation and they were set up to either kill us or take us away from our families, remove us from society, whatever it is. They are still current.
To civilise us, to civilise us.
Well, not even that. It was to get rid of us because what did they come for?
Yeah.
The land.
Yeah.
And who was in the way?
We are, yeah.
And where does the power stay?
Yeah.
And where do you get your money from? It's all in the land, right? What we need to do today is we can't get it all back and we can't, you know, undo history. But what we can do is reconcile with history. I'm not talking about reconciliation, just saying, but reconcile with what's happened and how do we move forward and make this better? Because I don't want my daughter or my grandkids or, you know, you don't want it needs to be different because it's bloody hard. It is so hard and we're all tired and I don't want the next generation to be as tired as we are because all you do is fight.
And there's not enough of us anyways. There's 3% of us. And if you think about
and in Victoria, we're under 1%, right?
Yeah.
So we're fighting for changes and, you know, the rhetoric's still there. You tell people, I don't want your backyard. That's not what we're coming for.
Yeah.
Oh, you want money. It's not all about money.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about dignity and pride and holding your head high, and which we do so well, but to be able to have the same opportunities
and
as everyone
enjoy
else.
the same privileges.
That's exactly right.
And this land of opportunities, the lucky country, we're not asking for more than the average Australian.
No, we're not. No, we're not. And I think the thing is, if you look at, so we've got to create a lasting public record. And what we want to do is join those dots about how we got to where we are so we can unpack it for people about how the entrenched poverty and the dispossession has continued, looks differently, but why we need to do certain things differently for mob.
Mm-hmm. But you're going to have a lot of non-Aboriginal people listening to this podcast saying, but don't you get all this extra money?
I wish.
There's $30 billion that's spent or wasted across Indigenous affairs. Where's that $30 billion? A lot of people, and it was used as propaganda during the referendum, but the Productivity Commission clearly states, and there's an evaluation of government expenditure. So go to the Productivity Commission and read the reports, especially the Indigenous Disadvantage Report. But I read from the Productivity Commission in 2018, this is when I first heard about this $30 billion, 6 years ago, by the way before the referendum. And it literally published, the data said that out of $30 billion, only $5.9 billion reaches the ground.
If that.
If that. So $24 billion does not get to community or the 5,000 plus Aboriginal community-controlled or whatever organisations that get government funding, whether it's from local, state or federal funding.
Yep.
So people don't realise that our old Minister for Indigenous Affairs, Nigel Scullion, awarded a grant to the Darwin Fisheries Association, to his mates in the Northern Territory, it was about $160,000. Google it if you don't believe me. And that was to pay for lawyers to fight the traditional owners over fishing rights. That was used out of the Indigenous budget. So
Yeah.
people don't, and these are examples I need to use in training when saying, but who's holding our Indigenous Affairs Minister accountable when he grants his mates money out of our budget to fight traditional owners in court over native title rights or fishing rights?
So we just did the land injustice and we broke it down, and I don't have the figures on me, about how much from gold, how much we're pulling out of the ground just in the state. It's trillions of dollars. How much of that went to First Peoples? Zero. Absolutely nothing, right? Even water. Like, we don't get absolutely anything from our land that is constantly being decimated. And that's our traditional lands. And we're not asking for a lot, but when you're pulling out trillions, can you give us a bit of land to practice culture on? Like, when we're not asking for millions and millions of dollars, but what does it look like? What does it look like, and what should we have? And people are just, you're right, people say, don't you get enough? Don't you? Well, actually, I don't know about you, but I don't see any of it.
No, I don't see any of it either.
And I don't know where it goes. And I look at places like, because I think a lot of our...
I got told where it goes. It's caught up in administration.
Well, it is.
And who's actually benefiting from our disadvantage, because it's called the Indigenous Disadvantage Report.
Yeah.
Who's benefiting from our disadvantage? If it's caught up in administration, it's obviously non-Aboriginal people.
Yeah.
And people are not probably going to like what I'm about to say, but it's actually paying off a lot of non-Aboriginal people's mortgages. That's where the money's going.
Well, it's going to jobs
Yes.
that are supposed to be evaluating something when you don't really, I mean, I look at, so some of the orgs that have come forward have so much administration because they're getting so many different, because they have to just take money where they can, and then they've got to report on it. And they're like, that's one full-time job there, but we don't get paid for that because we have to, I think every cent has to be accounted for when you look at blackfellas.
Oh, blackfellas got to jump for a lot more hoops.
Yeah.
A lot more hoops.
Yeah.
They're non-Aboriginal people. And if we don't meet our targets or we can't
But
show...
we exceed our targets.
Yeah.
Because
but
there's
when
so much
non-Aboriginal
need.
organisations or NGOs don't exceed their targets, they don't get...
No.
There's no consequences.
And we've gone through a lot of that through the hearings.
Okay.
They're worth listening to.
This is exactly what I was hoping would come out of this yarn, is that this is not just about stolen generations and stealing kids.
It's about accountability.
Yeah.
It's about where do the dollars go.
Yeah.
It's about what are you doing or what have you said you're going to do that you haven't done. It's about self-determination. It's about why can't you hand over the power? Like you say you're going, that's why the accountability hearings are so important, because of what they've said they were going to do.
Yeah.
Sitting with women in prison and listening to their stories, and can't even make a phone call because it costs too much money. And we've been able to, got some really great media out of, I think the title of was It Costs More to Call the Pope than it does to make a mobile call out of a prison. And all they want to do is be connected. And I just think therapeutically, if they're speaking to their families, people are going to be better or feel better. And, there's all this stuff that we can't even give those women in prison proper medical. Right?
So this commission is a voice for the voiceless.
I would say it's a voice for
everybody.
everybody.
But these women in prison, I don't think they ever would have thought that people like you would be in there listening to their stories. They're usually forgotten.
Oh, and we did go to the men.
And the men as well. Don't
we did
forget
go to the men, sorry, but the women really, there's some stories from there where I was just like, what? And there was...
How could this be happening?
Yeah.
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 And how are we going to change things?
Things like not even knowing where your kids are, right? You just don't know because no one will tell you.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can't get to them, like how just...
And as a mum,
I couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
I seriously could not imagine. And it was only a couple of months ago where I got a call from somebody that was in the labour suite and the department were outside in the waiting room.
Yeah. And I've been in that situation and we still talk about it every day as black fellas.
Yeah.
That we live with the fear that tomorrow our kids can be taken.
At any
time. And people look at me like, what do you mean? How could that be? So my nan used to say, don't ever tick the box. Don't fill out forms because you don't have to take your kids.
I worked in child protection, or side, I worked at VACA, and I just had this, we don't have removal, right? But this overwhelming, they could take my baby.
Yeah.
And I had to leave without her because she was prem, right? And so then I was in there every day at 5:30. Yeah. I made myself sick being in there from the moment I woke up to the moment I needed to sleep. And I was just in there that whole time.
Yeah.
And I remember saying I wrote an op-ed on it actually. I said to my mum, did you and Dad ever have a conversation about us kids? She said, yes. Imagine you have to have that conversation. Like I was because it just made, when you have your own, it makes you look at things. And she said, yeah. And I was just like, oh my God.
Or even registering a birth certificate.
Well, I got told, are you sure you're Aboriginal after I gave birth to my child? This is 13 years ago.
Are you sure?
Are you
sure? Did you tick the wrong box?
I'm sorry. Yeah.
Come to the mesh. Come meet my mob. So
but it's even. You know what? It's even. It's even when you, you go for a rental or you put down where you work. And I've worked at Aboriginal organisations, right? You don't want to put it down.
No.
Because you go, well, what do you work there?
Well, not only that, but you probably know you're not going to get the house.
Yeah.
Right, which is
or if you're applying for something, I know, credit or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And I've done that.
Yeah. There's still this kind of, you're navigating society, but you're very careful on what you're writing, who you're giving information to. We're always thinking.
Yeah.
Which is something that a lot of non-Aboriginal people don't have to think about.
I get, it's not a real commission. It's just like a line of inquiry. No, it's a royal commission. You're a commissioner. You're an Aboriginal woman on a, I am. Yeah. People can't
put their heads around it, can't process it.
Because we're not supposed to have any power.
No. You just don't look like a commissioner.
Well, I don't even look Aboriginal. Let me tell you, I cop a lot of that on social media.
Especially, yes, you're in Melbourne. A lot of Greeks and Italians here.
Yeah.
Probably think that you're one of them. How deadly is it that finally we got to have this yarn?
I know.
Without crying, which is pretty
deadly. We got through it.
If there was anything, I know, it's like, hold back now, don't talk about our kids. If there was anything, especially for just I know a lot of mob listen to this podcast, but I'm always pushing my podcast more and more as a resource, like what to do, where to go, what to listen to, what's out there. And I'm saying to people now more and more, have you listened to this episode of my podcast? Like, go and listen to this. There's Uncle Laura Maguire in Noongar country. Amazing episode. Stan Grant, Annie Leah Purcell, Anita Heiss. There's some amazing people. And there's more. Belinda Duarte, Greg Phillips. Oh, my
God. She's my girl.
I could keep on going. And everyone's going to say, well, what about me? Like Leroy and Cherie and Will. All these people I've had on this podcast over the last 4 years. I've got this wealth of knowledge. It's like this library now for anybody that's either on their journey, finding who they are as black fellas and needing to understand, all of us as black fellas and how different we are and the different paths we've taken and different jobs that we do, different roles that we play in our family and community. So there's this wealth of knowledge now within the Black Magic Woman podcast, and I absolutely love it. That's why I don't want to stop doing this podcast. But for people now to hear firsthand from a commissioner at the Your Justice Commission, what do you want people to what do you want to leave people with that are listening to this yarn?
So I think there's this, what I reflect on all the time. So we have a Woiwurrung word, which is my language, and it's woman jeka, but it doesn't mean welcome, and everybody thinks it means welcome. It means to come with purpose. Is that not the best? And that's what I think you need. What is it? Like, find your purpose. What is it? And where do you need to go to get that? Because that's how you're going to be fulfilled. I get fulfilled by just helping others get to where they've got to go and holding space for people, and just, you know, you don't work with mob for fame, for money, for media, for podcast. Like, you don't do that. You do that in the hope that one thing you do helps someone.
Yeah.
And I just, you know, that's my sort of, I think it's the most amazing word. And if you get up every day with purpose, and it doesn't matter what you do, and, you know, I wouldn't be where I am if it wasn't for the little quiet achievers that help me get to where I am, and sometimes I'm their voice as well. So find and be you, find your purpose, and you'll be deadly.
Well, that's for everyone listening to the podcast. You know what I took out of the yarn so much, but just to listen.
Yeah.
That's all you need to do, is to listen.
I think for non-mob, it's like, really take it on. Like, really take on what people are saying, and don't sit there and say, what can I do? Just reflect on what you've heard, and you'll find your way. Like, in this, it's tricky, right? We're traumatised people. We struggle and we have our bad days, and sometimes you may step on our toes, but it doesn't mean you stop. Like, be a really good ally. Yeah. And don't try and do it for us. Just walk with us. But, you know, I've never listened so deeply, and I really understand, you know, how Auntie Judy Atkinson talks about Dadiri.
Deep listening. Watch it on YouTube. Auntie Judy Atkinson. Can't wait to get her on the podcast.
I think if you really, I don't know, I think it's as we get older too, or is it just as black fellas we reflect a lot and just learn?
It's a skill.
Yeah.
To be able to sit in silence.
We don't need
people can't do it.
Yeah, I know. We don't need to be here like talking. Like, sometimes and I've realised sometimes that's all people need, is someone to hear and to listen. And, you know, I can listen with purpose because truth is going to seek justice, right?
The last words killed me. You know, the South African people, they got truth and reconciliation. They didn't get any justice. And my auntie said, we got to learn from them fellas over there.
Yeah. And
I honestly believe justice. I always say that if we get truth and justice right, then reconciliation will sort itself out.
Well, I don't know if we need reconciliation. I think if you
white
you
fellas
can't have treaty without truth, right? And you can't have justice without truth. So we've got it all happening here. I don't know if it's reconciliation anymore. I think it's I don't know what the word is.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually more than that, and it's bigger than that. And I'm hoping people come on the journey, particularly here in Victoria. And look, we know we've got everyone nationally and internationally watching, and I hope we make the impact and get the results we really want.
I reckon we will. How can we not, especially when we've got one good example that's up and running, and there's a model for other states and territories to follow. Truth telling is definitely on my agenda. I kind of don't want to waste any more time working with organisations unless they're committed to truth telling. I'm going to see if I can get you in, even if I have to Zoom you in the room, to maybe a few truth telling workshops at the Black Card, and we can hear firsthand on what you're doing, and then they can ask you questions instead of people like me that are watching from the outside, looking in. But on that note, thank you for giving up your evening to be here.
Very welcome.
And I can't wait to, I want to do the work with you on the side. I'll be on the sideline.
We've got this.
We got it.
We got it.
So I love you, my sister, and thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Commissioner Hunter.
Thank you, my sister. Thank you.
And for everyone that's listening, I really do hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Until next time, bye for now.
If you'd like any more info on today's guest, please visit our show notes in the episode description. A big shout out to all you Deadly Mob and allies who continue to listen, watch and support our podcast. Your feedback means the world. You can rate and review the podcast on Apple and Spotify, or even head to our socials and YouTube channel and drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. The Black Magic Woman podcast is produced by Clint Curtis.